For this lecture, we're going to look at the immune system and specifically how our immune system fights viruses and bacteria. So viruses and bacteria are pathogens. Pathogens are our ancient enemies. They're basically organisms or even substances that can cause disease. And human pathogens have found us delicious since the days we were cavemen. Some examples are viruses like Ebola, which is raging everywhere, HIV, which causes AIDS, influenza, which causes the flu, etc. Bacteria, such as strep, which can give you strep throat, E. coli can give you food poisoning, staph can cause painful boils, and then protists that cause malaria. Malaria actually is not a protist. It is the disease caused by the protist, by a plasmodium. There are amoebas, which if you drink in Mexico or other foreign cities will give you the runs or diarrhea, otherwise known as Montezuma's revenge. And just a reminder, protists, like the picture, like they're pictured below, are single-celled eukaryotes, right? These guys have nuclei, whereas bacteria don't. So the immune system is our body's defense against pathogens, and it exists because pathogens exist. In other words, our immune system was created as a response to pathogens. If there were no pathogens that would be infecting and harming us, we would need no immune system. But it is our defense mechanism against pathogens like viruses and bacteria. Okay, so I actually want you guys to copy paste the YouTube link from the presentation that is in the PowerPoint lecture or lecture PowerPoints folder on Blackboard. So you guys can go to this slide, copy paste the link, and watch this video. It is really cool animation of how a virus will attack the cell. But hopefully this will whet your appetite. It's a short video, 4 minutes. Will whet your appetite for this lecture. Okay. So let's look at how pathogens cause disease. First, bacteria. Bacteria are prokaryotes, right? They don't have a nucleus. They're small, tiny little microorganisms, and they actually affect the body by carrying or releasing toxins, which can either disrupt normal cell function or straight up kill cells. They can release toxins that will burst cells or just completely kill them. And so obviously bacteria can multiply, can divide really, really, really quickly. So in a matter of hours, bacteria can reach levels that are toxic to your body, and they're releasing toxins, they carry toxins that can start killing cells and disrupting cells, which will make you sick. Viruses actually are not living organisms. There's a debate about whether they're living organisms or not. The reason that is because they don't meet some of the standards, some of the universal criteria for living organisms. Basically, they can't survive on their own. They need to infect an actual cell, whether a bacteria or a eukaryotic cell, and hijack their components to replicate. They can't replicate on their own. So what viruses do is they affect the body by infecting cells. They are parasitic, so they need to infect a host in order to survive and reproduce. And we'll see how viruses infect cells in a little bit. The fever, headaches, diarrhea, and other symptoms of infection that we normally associate with bacteria and viruses are actually the result of your body fighting against the infection. So they're not actually the damage that's being done by the bacteria and the viruses. It's the result of your body fighting the infection. Okay, so let's look at how viruses infect cells. So if you look at the diagram on the left, number 1, A virus will bind to the surface of a host cell, so a cell in your body, using the receptors of the host. So all of your cells have these proteins on the surface that act as receptors that bind to other proteins and bring them into the cell. So a virus basically hijacks that or uses it to enter the cell. So that's step one. After it has bound to the receptor, then it's actually going to inject its genetic code. And depending on the genetic code, a virus can be an RNA virus or a DNA virus. In this example, it is an RNA virus. So this virus injects its RNA, and the RNA is reverse transcribed into DNA. Remember that transcription is a process by which DNA is copied onto RNA. So the reverse of that, reverse transcription, is RNA being transcribed into DNA. So reverse transcription occurs, and then the reverse transcribed DNA goes through the normal process of making proteins, the central dogma, right? So it goes from DNA transcribed into RNA. They're indicated by viral genomes, and that viral RNA is then translated to make viral proteins, the proteins that will actually make up the virus. So the fourth step is the newly synthesized proteins in RNA are packaged to form new viruses that are released from the cell. So these viruses, you can see on step 4, are actually coming out of the cell and now have their own proteins on the surface, the pink balls that will bind to surface receptors of other cells and continue to infect more and more cells. Okay, so now let's look at how your immune system fights against pathogen infection. So your body has 3 main lines of defense. The first one is the skin and the mucous membranes. So your skin is what protects everything inside you from everything outside of you. Okay, and say a virus or a bacteria penetrates that first line of defense. If you get a cut or the virus gets inside your body, the next line of defense is going to be innate immunity. And the third line of defense is going to be adaptive immunity. And innate and adaptive immunity consist of immune cells. So if you look at the diagram there to the right, number 2 and number 3, those are cells. And those immune cells recognize and attack foreign substances and pathogens. So let's look at innate immunity. Innate immunity is a rapid response. So whenever a bacteria penetrates the skin in a cut or whatever, innate immunity is going to be the first thing that starts attacking the pathogen. And they are, it's called innate immunity because it's simply there. It's always prowling. These white blood cells are prowling around and looking for pathogens to devour. And again, so like I said, they consist of white blood cells that engulf pathogens via phagocytosis. And there's a video in the next slide to where you can see phagocytosis, but it is a cool little process that we'll look at in class where the cell can eat. Basically, phago means to eat, phage means to eat, and cytosis means cell. So it's the process of eating another cell. And that's how these white blood cells attack bacteria and viruses that are attacking your system. An example of those are macrophages. And macro means big, and phage means eating, right? So these are big eaters. And that's the cell that's pictured on the diagram. So this next slide is a video of a macrophage eating bacteria. So the bacteria, the tiny little black ovals, and the macrophage is a bigger cell. So again, click on the link in the slide that is on the lecture materials in the lecture PowerPoints and watch the movie to get an idea of how these cells actually phagocytose or engulf bacteria. Okay, so the third line of defense is going to be adaptive immunity. And adaptive immunity is a slow response. This takes days to really take effect, and this happens when, say, you have a bacterial infection and your innate immune system can't overcome it. So bacteria are multiplying rapidly and your macrophages are just having a hard time getting rid of the bacteria. So then your adaptive immune system kicks in and helps get rid of that infection. So the adaptive immune system consists of white blood cells called lymphocytes. And you have two main types. You have B cells, which create antibodies, and antibodies are proteins that can recognize foreign substances and basically flag them. It's almost like a beacon saying, eat me, eat me. So B cells will create antibodies that will bind to the pathogens, and then that way macrophages and other phagocytosing cells can go and eat those pathogens. They'll find them quicker. T cells will just help other immune cells do their job, and they'll also kill infected human cells. So if the cells in your own body are infected with a virus, these T cells can go and kill those cells so that they don't spread the virus to other healthy cells. Okay, and lastly, I'll leave you guys with this video of how your immune system responds to a bacterial infection. It's a neat little video, animates everything we've looked at in this lecture, from your first line of defense, which is your skin, to the innate immunity side of things, which are the macrophages and other cells called neutrophils, which I didn't mention in this lecture, and then your adaptive immune system, which are your B cells and your T cells, and how those all work together to fight a bacterial infection. It's really cool. Copy and paste a link from the lecture, from the actual PowerPoint, not this recording, and watch the video, and it'll help you understand it a lot better.